While my cousins were celebrating their millions at my grandfather's funeral, I stood there holding a crumpled envelope with a single plane ticket inside. Everyone laughed at me that day. 8 months later, they were begging for my forgiveness. My name is Adrian Blackwell, and I'm about to tell you how the worst day of my life became the beginning of everything I never knew I needed. But first, let me introduce you to the players in this game my grandfather orchestrated from beyond the grave. There was Caleb, my older cousin, standing there in his $6,000 Armani suit, already practicing his CEO speech for the company employees. Marlene, his sister, was barely hiding her excitement behind her designer sunglasses, probably planning which Instagram filter would best capture her new yacht. Their parents, Victor and Clorinda, stood like vultures who'd finally found their feast. My uncle's hand already reaching for the papers the lawyer was holding. And then there was me, the high school history teacher who drove 4 hours in a Honda Civic that needed new brakes just to say goodbye to the only person in this family who ever really saw me. Grandfather Harlan built an empire from nothing, turned a single fishing boat into Blackwell Shipping Industries, and everyone wanted their piece of his kingdom. Everyone except me. I just wanted 5 more minutes to play chess with the old man who taught me that the most powerful moves are the ones nobody sees coming. That funeral wasn't just about saying goodbye to Harlan Blackwell. It was the day I learned that sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest secret, and sometimes the people laughing at you are standing on ground that's about to crumble beneath their feet. My alarm went off at 6:10 a.m. every weekday, just like it had for the past 7 years since I started teaching at Lincoln High School in Cleveland. The ceiling in my one-bedroom apartment had the same water stain I'd been staring at for 4 years, shaped like the state of Texas if you squinted hard enough. My neighbor's dog was already barking right on schedule, and I could hear Mrs. Cho starting her morning exercises through the paper-thin walls. This was my life, predictable, modest, and completely different from the world I'd grown up in. You see, being a Blackwell meant something in certain circles. It meant yacht clubs and private schools, summer houses and stock portfolios. But for me, it meant choosing between paying rent and fixing my car's transmission because I'd walked away from all of that to teach teenagers about the Revolutionary War and the Great Depression. My father, Darren, understood that choice. He was the only one who ever did. Dad died when I was 16, a heart attack at his desk while reviewing contracts for his brother Victor's division of grandfather's company. He'd spent his whole life being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who never complained when Victor took credit for his ideas. The last thing he ever said to me was, "Adrian, don't let them turn you into something you're not. Your grandfather did that to me and look where I am." 4 hours later, he was gone. My mother, Gina, picked up the pieces after that. She was a nurse at Cleveland General, working 13-hour shifts to keep us afloat after we learned Dad had signed away most of his company shares to help Victor cover some bad investments. That was Dad, always cleaning up other people's messes, always believing family meant sacrifice. Mom never said a bitter word about it, but I saw how she looked at Victor at Dad's funeral, and I understood that sometimes the deepest anger doesn't need words. Grandfather Harlan was a mystery, wrapped in a 3-piece suit. He built Blackwell Shipping from a single boat he bought with his Navy discharge pay after World War II. By the time I was born, he owned a fleet of cargo ships, warehouses in 13 cities, and enough money to buy whatever he wanted. But here's the thing about my grandfather. He didn't believe in giving. He believed in earning. Every birthday card came with a $30 bill and a note that said, "Make it worth more." Every Christmas gift was something practical, like books about business or certificates for online courses in accounting. The only time Grandfather Harlan seemed genuinely interested in me was during our Sunday chess games. It started when I was 11, right after I'd won my school's chess tournament. He showed up at our apartment one Sunday morning, set up a board, and said, "Show me what you've got." I lost in 13 moves, but he came back the next Sunday and the next, and eventually those games became the one constant between us. "You play like your father," he told me once, "too worried about protecting your pieces, not focused enough on winning the game." "Maybe I don't want to sacrifice everything just to win," I replied. He actually smiled at that. The first real smile I'd ever seen from him. "Maybe that's why you're the only one who still interests me, Adrian." Caleb and Marlene never understood those chess games. Caleb was too busy shadowing Grandfather at the office, learning about profit margins and tax shelters. He'd gotten his MBA from Wharton, Grandfather's alma mater, and never let anyone forget it. Every family dinner turned into Caleb's personal TED talk about market optimization and strategic acquisitions. He spoke in buzzwords and PowerPoint slides, turning every conversation into a business pitch. Marlene took a different approach. She turned herself into a brand, chronicling her life as the shipping heir on social media. 300,000 followers watched her pose on various boats in various designer outfits at various European ports. She called it building her platform, but really she was just spending grandfather's money while waiting for more. Her biggest achievement was getting a blue check mark on Instagram and dating a Swiss banker who owned a vineyard. Victor and Clorinda, Caleb and Marlene's parents were the ultimate power couple in the most hollow way possible. Victor had worked his way up to CFO of Blackwell Shipping, though most of the real work was done by his assistant. Clorinda spent her time at charity galas, not because she cared about the causes, but because she liked seeing her picture in the society pages. They lived in a house so big they needed an intercom system to talk to each other. And then there was me teaching 44 teenagers about the Constitution, grading papers at a kitchen table I bought at a garage sale, and feeling more fulfilled than any of them could imagine. That was my life before the funeral, before the envelope, before everything changed. I thought I knew who I was and where I came from. Turns out I was watching the wrong pieces on the board all along. The Rochester Country Club had never felt more suffocating than it did that October afternoon. Grandfather Harland had specifically requested his will be read here in the same oak paneled room where he'd negotiated his biggest deals over brandy and cigars. The mahogany table reflected our faces like a dark mirror, and I could see Caleb adjusting his Rolex for the third time in 6 minutes. We'd just come from the cemetery where the autumn rain had turned the burial into a muddy mess that Clorinda complained about the entire ride over. Before we begin, Mr. Harding, the family attorney, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and cleared his throat. I want you all to know that Harland was very specific about these arrangements. He reviewed this will 1 week before his passing. Victor leaned forward, his hands already forming fists of anticipation. We understand, Harding. Harland discussed the succession plan with me extensively. That was a lie, and everyone knew it. Grandfather never discussed business outside the office, and he certainly never promised anything to anyone. But Victor had been telling anyone who'd listened that he was taking over as CEO, that Caleb would be his right hand, and that the family legacy was secure. Let's proceed, then. Harding opened the leather-bound folder. To my eldest son, Victor Blackwell, and his wife, Clorinda, I leave the estate in the Hamptons, and the investment portfolio contained in account ending in Fort 582. Clorinda grabbed Victor's arm, her diamond bracelet catching the light. The Hamptons house. Oh, Victor. He did remember how much we loved it there. To my grandson, Caleb Blackwell, Harding continued, I leave Blackwell Shipping Industries and all its operational assets, with the condition that he maintains current employment levels for at least 1 year. Caleb stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. I knew it, grandfather. I won't let you down. He was already pulling out his phone, probably to update his LinkedIn profile to CEO. To my granddaughter, Marlene Blackwell, I leave the Manhattan penthouse on Central Park West and the yacht, Serenity, currently moored in Newport. Marlene let out a squeal that could have shattered crystal. The penthouse? Oh my God, do you know what that's worth? And the yacht? My followers are going to die. Mr. Harding turned to me, and I saw something in his eyes that looked almost like pity. And to my grandson, Adrian Blackwell, I leave this. He pulled out a small white envelope, worn at the corners, my name written across it in grandfather's shaky handwriting. The room went silent for exactly 3 seconds before Caleb started laughing. Are you serious? Caleb's voice cracked with amusement. That's it, an envelope. I took it with steady hands, though my heart was pounding. The paper felt thin, insignificant. Inside was a single plane ticket. Rome, one way, departing in 59 hours. Let me guess. Caleb snatched the ticket from my hand before I could stop him. A coach ticket. Oh, this is rich. The teacher gets a vacation. Marlene was already recording on her phone. This is actually hilarious. Adrian, your face right now. Don't worry. Maybe he left you some frequent flyer miles, too. Victor stood up, straightening his tie with the authority of someone who just won everything. Harland always said you lacked the killer instinct for business, Adrian. At least he gave you something nice. Rome is lovely this time of year. It's probably his way of saying goodbye, Clorinda added, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. A little trip to help you process everything. How thoughtful. My Mother, who'd been silent in the corner, finally spoke. Is that everything, Mr. Harding? That concludes the distribution of assets, Harding replied, closing the folder. There is a personal letter for Adrian to be opened only upon his arrival in Rome. A letter? Caleb was practically howling now. What's he going to say? Sorry you're poor. Enjoy the pizza? Caleb, enough, Victor said, though he was smiling. Adrian chose his path. He wanted to be a teacher, and Harland respected that enough to give him a parting gift. We should all be grateful for what we've received. I looked at the ticket again. October 19th, 4:00 p.m. arrival, Alitalia. Flight 72. Why so specific? Why Rome? Grandfather had never mentioned Italy in all our years of chess games. He'd talked about Shanghai, London, Hamburg, but never Rome. Well, I stood up, sliding the ticket back into the envelope. I guess I better pack. You're actually going? Marlene looked genuinely surprised. You're going to use your sick days to take a random trip to Rome? Your grandfather gave me a ticket, I said, meeting each of their eyes in turn. The least I can do is use it. Victor shook his head. Sentimental fool, just like your father. Darren never understood that emotion has no place in business either. That's when I knew I was definitely getting on that plane, because Victor was wrong about my father, wrong about me, and maybe, just maybe, wrong about what? Grandfather had really left me. The ticket weighed nothing in my pocket, but somehow it felt heavier than all the millions they'd just inherited. As I walked out of that country club, their laughter following me to the parking lot, I remembered grandfather's last words to me during our final chess game. The best moves, Adrian, are the ones your opponent never sees coming. The rain had stopped, and for the first time that day, the sun broke through the clouds. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the plane ticket while my laptop displayed my bank account balance, $2,95823. My rent was due in 6 days. My car needed new brake pads. I had 44 essays on the Civil War to grade. Every logical part of my brain screamed that flying to Rome was insane. But I couldn't stop thinking about grandfather's face during our last chess game, just 2 weeks before he died. He'd been different that day, softer somehow, like he'd finally stopped playing a role he'd been performing for decades. Adrian, he'd said, moving his knight in a pattern I didn't recognize. What do you know about trust? It's earned, not given, I'd responded. The same answer he'd drilled into all of us since childhood. No, boy. Real trust is knowing when to follow without understanding why. Your father knew that. He trusted me with something once, something precious, and I failed him. But you, Adrian, you're different. You don't want anything from me. I never have, grandfather. I know. That's why when the time comes, you'll trust me, even when everyone else thinks you're a fool. Now holding that ticket, his words felt less like a memory and more like a message. I picked up my phone and called my mother. I'm going, I said as soon as she answered. I knew you would, Gina replied without hesitation. Your grandfather called me last month. He didn't say much, just that I should support whatever decision you made after the funeral. Mom, this is crazy. I can't afford to miss work. I have responsibilities. Adrian, your father once told me that Harland wasn't always the man we knew. He said there was a before and after in his father's life, and we only knew the after. Maybe this is about the before. I spent the next morning at Lincoln High arranging for a substitute teacher. My principal, Dr. Wilson, wasn't happy about the sudden request, but I'd never taken a sick day in 7 years, so she grudgingly approved 4 days off. 4 days to fly to Rome and figure out what game my grandfather was playing. Mr. Blackwell, you okay? Asked Janet, one of my brightest students after my last class. You seem different today. Just thinking about history, Janet. How? Sometimes the most important moments look like nothing when they're happening. I packed light, 1 carry-on bag with 2 changes of clothes and my father's old leather journal that I'd carried since his funeral. The Uber to Cleveland Metropolitan Airport cost me $43 I couldn't spare, but I was already committed to this insanity. At the gate, waiting to board, I pulled out the envelope again. That's when I noticed something I'd missed before. In the corner, barely visible, was a tiny number written in pencil, 1958, the year grandfather would have been 23. The year after he'd left the Navy. The flight attendant called my boarding group, and I got in line behind a family arguing about seating arrangements. The mother trying to juggle 2 kids while the father checked his phone obsessively. Normal people with normal problems, not wondering why their dead grandfather had sent them on a mysterious journey across the Atlantic. I found my seat 33B, middle. Seat in the back of the plane. Of course Caleb had been right about it. Being coach. The man to my left was already asleep and snoring. The woman to my right had claimed both armrests and was watching a movie on her iPad without headphones. As the plane lifted off, Cleveland shrinking below us, I thought about Caleb, probably already in grandfather's office, sitting in his chair, feeling like a king. Marlene was definitely posting sunset photos from the yacht by now. Victor and Clorinda were probably meeting with financial advisors about their newfound wealth. And here I was, cramped in coach, flying toward a mystery with money I didn't have to spare, but something felt right about it. For the first time since grandfather died, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The flight attendant came by with drinks. "Sir, something to drink?" "Just water. Thanks." She handed me a bottle, and as I twisted it open, I remembered another chess lesson. Grandfather had sacrificed his queen, the most powerful piece, to win a game. I'd been shocked, unable to understand why he'd give up so much. "Power isn't about what you have, Adrian," he'd explained. "It's about what you're willing to lose to gain something better. Most people can't see past the loss. That's why they never really win." The plane banked east, heading into the night toward Rome and whatever grandfather had hidden there. My cousins thought they'd won everything that mattered. But as I settled in for the 9-hour flight, I had a feeling that grandfather's real game was just beginning, and I was the only piece he'd positioned to play it. The captain announced our cruising altitude, and I closed my eyes, my father's journal pressed against my chest, trusting a dead man's plan even though I couldn't see the board. The wheels touched down at Rome's Fiumino airport at exactly 4:18 p.m. local time. My legs were cramped. My back ached, and I'd barely slept during the 9-hour flight. The Italian announcements mixed with English as we taxied to the gate, and suddenly the reality hit me. I was in Rome with no hotel reservation, no plan, and no idea what I was supposed to do next. Immigration was a blur of stamps and questions. "Purpose of visit?" the officer asked in accented English. "I honestly don't know," I replied, too tired to lie. He looked at me strangely but stamped my passport anyway. "Welcome to Italy." I followed the crowd toward baggage claim even though I only had my carry-on. The arrivals hall was chaos. Families reuniting, drivers holding signs for business people, tourists looking lost. I was about to head for the exit when I saw it. A professionally printed sign reading Adrian Blackwell, held by a man in an expensive black suit. My heart stopped. I approached cautiously. "I'm Adrian Blackwell." The driver's face lit up with relief. "Mr. Blackwell, finally. Please come quickly." His English was heavily accented but clear. "Who sent you?" "Your grandfather. Arranged everything months ago. My name is Luca. Please, we have a long drive." He took my bag before I could protest and led me outside to a black Mercedes sedan that probably cost more than I made in 2 years. The October air was warm, nothing like Cleveland's autumn chill. Luca opened the rear door for me, and I slid onto leather seats that felt like clouds. "Where are we going?" I asked as he pulled away from the curb. "Monturio Estate, 1 hour north in the Sabine Hills." "I don't understand. My grandfather never mentioned any estate in Italy." Luca met my eyes in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Harland, he owned the estate for 46 years. He visit every September, 1 week, always alone. 46 years. That would mean since 1979, when I was minus 13 years old. The math didn't make sense. Nothing made sense. We left Rome's sprawl behind, climbing into hills covered with olive groves and vineyards. The landscape was almost painfully beautiful, like something from a movie about finding yourself in Italy. Luca drove with Italian confidence, taking curves at speeds that made me grip the door handle. "How did you know my grandfather?" I asked. "My father was his driver first. When Papa died, I take over. 21 years now. I drive Mr. Harland when he come. 21 years of secret visits none of us knew about. What else had grandfather hidden?" The road became narrower, winding through a small village where old men sat outside a cafe watching us pass. Then Luca turned onto a private road lined with cypress trees. At the end, electronic gates opened automatically, revealing a villa that took my breath away. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, terraces overlooking endless vineyards, gardens that looked like they belonged in a Renaissance painting. Luca parked in front of massive wooden doors that had to be centuries old. Before I could process what I was seeing, the doors opened and an elderly woman emerged. Elegant, poised, her silver hair pulled back in a simple bun, her eyes the same steel gray as grandfather's. She walked toward me slowly, tears streaming down her face, and I knew. Before Luca said the words that changed everything. "Adrian," Luca said softly. "Meet your grandmother, Serafina Blackwell." The world tilted. I actually reached for the car to steady myself. That's impossible. My grandmother died before I was born. Serafina reached me then, her hands taking mine, her grip surprisingly strong. "Your American grandmother did die, Carolyn, but I am very much alive." Her accent was musical, her English perfect but formal. She studied my face like she was memorizing it. "You have his eyes," she whispered. "But your father's gentle spirit. Come inside, Adrian. There is so much to tell you." The villa's interior was understated elegance, nothing like the gaudy mansion Victor and Clorinda owned. Serafina led me to a sitting room, where the walls were covered with photographs. I saw my grandfather, young and laughing, standing in front of a small church. A wedding photo. Grandfather and Serafina, both barely in their 20s, radiantly happy. "We married in 1958, Serafina said, watching me process everything. Harland had come to Italy with the Navy, stayed after the war to help with reconstruction. We met at a dance in Rome. He was so handsome, so full of dreams. We started with nothing, just a few acres of vines his friend sold us. For almost nothing." She poured 2 glasses of wine from a crystal decanter. "This is from our vineyard. Aravita, we call it, inheritance." The wine was extraordinary, complex and rich. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Grandfather had a whole life here. More than a life, Caro. He had a family. Me, our son, Alberto, the grandchildren he never met because he chose America instead. He left you. The Korean War started. Harland felt duty calling. He was supposed to be gone 6 months." Her voice carried sadness, not bitterness. "But he met your American grandmother while on leave. She was pregnant with Victor. An honorable man would have divorced me, but Harland could not bear to give up either life. So he kept both separate. Secret." My hands were shaking. "He lived a complete lie." "No, Adrian," Serafina said gently. "He lived 2 truths. He loved us both in different ways." She walked to an antique desk and pulled out a thick folder. "Blackwell Vineyards International. $49 million in assets. It is all yours, Adrian." He was very specific. "Not Victor. Not Caleb. You." The documents she handed me were overwhelming. Deeds, contracts, bank statements, proof that grandfather had an entire empire here. But what hit me hardest was the video she played on an old laptop, recorded 5 weeks before he died. Grandfather's face filled the screen. And for the first time ever, he looked peaceful. "Adrian, if you're watching this, then you trusted me enough to take the flight. Good. You always were the only one who understood that some things matter more than money. Your cousins got what they always wanted from me. The appearance of success. But appearances can be deceiving." He leaned closer. "Blackwell Shipping has been hemorrhaging money for 4 years. I hid it in the books, but Caleb is about to inherit a disaster. The penthouse has 2 mortgages. The yacht is leased. The Hampton estate. The bank owns 68% of it." My jaw dropped. I gave them exactly what they showed me. They valued hollow prizes that look golden from the outside. His eyes softened. "But you, Adrian? You visited me every Sunday just to play chess. Never asked for anything. Never angled for position. You chose teaching over money because you wanted purpose. So I'm giving you what you never asked for. Truth, family. And yes, wealth that is actually real." He took a breath. "The vineyard produces 2.1 million bottles a year. The villa has been in Serafina's family for 310 years. Your uncle Alberto runs operations. Your cousins Matteo and Evelina are good people. Nothing like Caleb and Marlene." He smiled faintly. "This is your real inheritance. A family that values work. Land that produces something real. A legacy built on truth, not lies. And Adrian, when Caleb calls you, within a month, begging for help, be kinder to him than he was to you. That is what makes you better. Checkmate, my boy." The video ended. The room was silent except for my heartbeat. Serafina squeezed my shoulder. "He talked about you constantly," she said. "Every visit, stories about his grandson. The teacher who chose meaning over money. I spent 3 weeks in Italy learning everything. Uncle Alberto looked so much like my father it hurt. Matteo and Evelina welcomed me like a long-lost brother. He was different here, Evelina told me one evening. Light, happy, hands in the dirt. Not the businessman you knew." The call from Caleb came exactly 24 days later. I was back in Cleveland grading papers when my phone rang at 12:14 a.m. Adrian, it's me, Caleb said. We need to talk. His voice was hollow, broken. The company's bankrupt. The accountants found everything. Dad's lost the house. Marlene's penthouse got foreclosed yesterday. It's all gone. I'm sorry, Caleb. No. You're not. And you shouldn't be. We were awful to you. He hesitated. Grandfather left you something real, didn't he? Yes, I said quietly. Good. You deserve it. You were the only one who actually loved him. The next day I offered Caleb a job. Managing U.S. distribution for Aravita wines. Salary. Not ownership. He accepted immediately. Marlene took longer, but eventually she came around too. She's actually good at marketing when she's selling something real. She's engaged now, to Luca's son. Living in Rome, learning the business from the ground up. Victor and Clorinda moved to a small apartment in New Jersey. Victor works as a bookkeeper. Clorinda works at Macy's. They don't speak to me. But Caleb says they're strangely happier. Forced to rely on each other instead of money. My mother moved into the guest house on the California property I bought with my first distribution payment. She retired from nursing and spends her days painting. And me? I still teach, part-time. Summers in Italy, learning the vineyard. Winters in Ohio, teaching history. Last week, I was in the villa playing chess with Uncle Alberto when he said something that stopped me cold. You know, your grandfather always said, the winner isn't who takes the most pieces, but who knows which pieces really matter. I looked at the board, then out at the vineyards, then at the photo of Harland on the wall, young in 1958. He won, I said softly. It just took 61 years for the game to end. Alberto smiled. No, Adrian. You won. You just didn't know you were playing. That crumpled envelope they all laughed at? It wasn't just a plane ticket. It was an invitation. To discover who I really was? Where I came from? What truly mattered? Grandfather gave my cousins what they thought they wanted. And he gave me what I didn't know I needed. The last bottle of wine he personally produced. Sits in my apartment in Cleveland, unopened. The label says Aravita 2025. And underneath, in his handwriting. For Adrian. Who understood that the best inheritance isn't what you're given, but what you're trusted to continue. Every Sunday, I still play chess. Sometimes with Alberto in Italy. Sometimes with my students. Sometimes alone, thinking about the old man. Who orchestrated the longest game I've ever seen. He taught me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. But in truth, family, and the courage to trust. When nothing makes sense. Turns out the board everyone else was watching. That was just the distraction. The real game was happening. On a completely different board. In a different country. In a different language. And grandfather made sure. I was the only one. Who got an invitation to play. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and share it with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the smallest gifts carry the biggest surprises. Drop a comment below about a time when something seemingly insignificant changed your life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories about families, secrets, and the unexpected ways life reveals who we really